Last week, I introduced to you a different conversation to be had to try to put deals together and to resolve problems. It's a go below the line conversation. I learned the value of this conversation in my very first case. It was quite a moment. I was sitting on the 45th floor of a building in downtown Dallas. I was a brand new lawyer, not really knowing what to do, not even knowing where the restrooms were at that point. In comes a partner with a big file. There was a claim that the firm had just received, and the partner invited me to work on this claim with him. Of course, I was happy to do so, and I dug in, and what I read about was a claim that was brought against a hospital that we represented involving a lady in her 70s who one day was experiencing some breathing difficulty, and so she called one of her sons, and they decided that it was prudent to take her to the emergency room. When she got to the emergency room, she got a full checkup, and thankfully everything checked out fine. She had not had a cardiac event, her respiratory system was good, and so they determined that she probably had a chest cold, but just to be safe, the hospital admitted her overnight for observation. The ER tech came to her bedside in the emergency room, got her and her gurney, and wheeled her up to the room where she would be spending the night. Now, if you know anything about hospitals, you know how a bed transfer gets done in a hospital. You basically move the gurney right up next to the bed, and there's a lot of sheets on the bed. Someone gets at the head of the patient, and someone gets at the foot of the patient, and you say 1, 2, 3, and you slide the patient over on the sheets. Now, you really pick up the sheets, and you got to hope that the patient comes with you. In this particular case, the lady's claim was that the ER tech was not strong enough to get a lady of her size into the bed, and so he had to lunge to do it, and when he lunged, he lost his balance and fell on her. She stated that immediately she cried out in pain, that she had severe pain through her back and her abdomen, and yet no one responded to her complaints. And so she complained day after day. They ultimately decided that they should do an MRI after she had been complaining of pain the next day and the day after. They did an MRI, and indeed, she did have 2 compression fractures in her back. Now, the challenging thing about this is she also had a long history of osteoporosis. And so it was unclear at this point whether those compression fractures were caused by some event with the bed transfer or by her osteoporotic condition. And so she brought this claim against the hospital, and what we decided to do was just to go talk to the nurse and the ER tech that were involved in the bed transfer. We had a great conversation with them, and they denied anything in terms of some sort of adverse event around this bed transfer. They weren't really clear on why we were talking to them. They said that the transfer was as clean as can be. They denied the fact that she reported any pain. They were really just a bit perplexed as to how this claim came about. And so what we decided to do was to go have a conversation with this particular lady. Her attorney agreed, and we actually went out to her house to have this conversation. Now, I was kind of a fly on the wall in this moment, and the attorney I was working with took the lead and asked her an hour and a half of questions. Now, it was thought that she might have been losing it a little bit, maybe suffering from some memory loss or dementia. But as I was there reading the medical records, it was absolutely clear she wasn't suffering from any memory loss at all. She remembered her hospital stay to a T. And so at the end of that conversation, the attorney I was working with asked what I thought was a really good question. He said, "Ma'am, what's it going to take to get this case resolved?" Here's what she said. She said that it was really important to her that things be done right in this hospital. She then went on to tell us that she had been a nurse in a hospital for 20 years, and that patient care and patient safety were things that were very, very important to her. She then went on to say that she was a bit old school, and she was raised to where if you did something to hurt somebody, you should apologize. That was the human thing to do. She said that no one in this hospital believed her, no one would listen to her, and certainly no one apologized. She also stated that it was really important to her that she be able to come back to this hospital as a patient, because it was at this hospital where her doctor had privileges, and she needed to be able to go back. Now, the attorney I was working with, he acknowledged everything that she said, but he asked her again, ma'am, what's it going to take to get this taken care of? Now, what was going through his mind was what? Yeah, it was money. And guess what? She said the same three things. Finally, her attorney intervened, and he looked at the attorney and said, we've made a demand for $150,000. That's what it's going to take to get this resolved. And the attorney I was working with said, thank you, that's what I needed to know. And we got up and we left. Now, when we were driving back down to our office, the attorney asked me what I thought, and I said, well, perhaps naively, it seems like it's pretty simple. If we assure that things are being done right, we offer an apology, and we invite her back, we probably could get this case resolved. The attorney I was working for, well, he had a different perspective on it. He commented on how green I was and how I was one of those idealistic young lawyers thinking that this was about something other than money. It was his perspective that it was money that was driving this. But it was interesting. I didn't hear that. So what we decided to do was a pre-suit mediation. She hadn't even sued us yet, and we were going to sit down with a mediator to try to work this out. So as part of that mediation was the litigation manager from the hospital, who was very, very aware of this go-below-the-line approach to negotiation. At lunch prior to the mediation, he asked me, John, what is going on below the line? And I told him, I said, well, what she's told us is that she wants to make sure things are being done right. She wants an apology, and she wants to be able to go back to this particular hospital. The litigation manager said, that's great. That's all I need to know. We got in the mediation, and the mediation was pretty typical. The plaintiff's attorney did kind of a day in the life and laid out a very compelling PowerPoint presentation about how this event has really affected her and caused her tremendous pain and suffering. The attorney that I was working with did a very, very sound closing argument where he laid out the causation defense and did so in a very, very compelling way. And then the mediator asked a question. The mediator said, you know, the next time that all of these people get together will be when you all walk into a courtroom to try this case. And the mediator said, is there anything that any of you wants to say to each other before we break and you all aren't together again until that day in court? The litigation manager raised his hand. I'll never forget, he looked across at the lady and he says, ma'am, you need to understand I'm a liberal in a conservative's job. Now, I was kind of perplexed. I said, politics? Now that doesn't make any sense. He said, here's what I mean by that. He then turned to her attorney and said, you tell me if I'm wrong. And he went on to explain that the typical defense strategy in a case like this, given a lady of her age and her health, would be to drag this out as long as possible with the hopes that she would die before this particular hospital company would have to pay her a dime. But instead, this litigation manager communicated to her that because he cares about her so much, he had his checkbook in his briefcase and was ready to write her a check for a reasonable amount. But he made sure that she understood that he could only write a check for a reasonable amount. He then went on to assure her that things were being done appropriately in that hospital. And he assured her that he would look into how bed transfers are being done to make sure there weren't corners being cut. What he did next was really interesting. He looked her square in the eyes and he said, ma'am, we obviously didn't treat you well during this last visit, and I'm sorry. He apologized to her. He gave her what she wanted. And then, in a very touching moment, he looked at her and said, ma'am, we'd be honored to have you as a patient in our hospital anytime. You are welcome to come back the next time that you need acute medical care. By this moment, she was in tears. The room was silent. And we ended at that moment caucusing. Now, the first demand from the plaintiff went from $150,000 down to $85,000. That move suggested that we had connected with this lady's interest. It wasn't about money for her. We ended the mediation that day with the other side at $40,000, us at $30,000, and I got to settle the case the next day for $35,000. Now the litigation manager says that because she was such a sympathetic witness, that a jury would have eaten right out of her hands, and that this could have resulted in a verdict in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. He thinks he saved perhaps that much money because he was willing to go below the line and connect with this lady's interests. This story is like many. What lies below the line is what drives people. This is what causes them to take the positions that they do, to pursue the things that they pursue. And the litigation manager, despite the fact that his counsel wasn't as on board as perhaps we should have been, he was savvy enough and wise enough to know that the elegant solution to this dispute would be generated by what's going on below the line, not above the line. Below the line provides a great opportunity to create excellent deals that satisfy what really drives parties. As you go forth this week, remember to go below the line.